How do you help swimmers learn to pace their races? Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. I was recently asked about how to help swimmers improve their pacing, and that's what we're going to discuss today. Before we start, I'm going to make the assumption that your swimmers are fit, because if your swimmers aren't fit, all the pacing strategy and anything that goes with that is all going to kind of go out the window because they're not going to be able to finish and execute the races the way that you want because they simply can't, they don't have the fitness to do so. So we're going to assume that they do have the physical abilities to execute races well. They just don't really know how to do it. Now, when trying to help swimmers improve their pacing, it's important to consider that cognitive approaches, or literally telling them what to do or how to pace a race, or think about negative splitting it, thinking about taking it out faster, all these ideas are just a starting point rather than an end goal. Swimmers may understand the concepts intellectually, but until they can actually feel it, until they actually do it, it's not going to really have a lot of meaning. They have to have practical experience to really get it. So for instance, you can tell them to take it out faster, to be more controlled, to descend, or to pick it up at the halfway point. And while they may understand that, they need to actually practice it. They need to actually do it to really be able to execute it. So to improve swimmers' pacing, we have to give them practice so that they can figure out what to actually do, what it's going to feel like, and how to execute some of the concepts that we give them. So the first option is to race. Humans learn by doing. So the more they can race, the faster they're going to figure out what works. And so the faster they're going to learn what's a positive experience and what's not a positive experience. If they go out too fast and they blow up, that's going to be a learning experience. If they go out too slow and they have way too much at the end, that's also going to be a learning experience. And it's going to be a really valuable one because one, they don't get the result that they want, and two, they can feel what it's like to actually make those mistakes, and that helps them learn. So the results they get and the physical experience that they have as they go through that race ultimately teaches them to be more effective with their pacing strategy. Human beings have a natural tendency to seek out the easiest way to accomplish our goals. And so the more swimmers race, the more they're going to lock in on the best way to execute to accomplish their goal with the optimal amount of effort. If you give them enough practice at racing, they're going to figure out the pacing sooner or later. The problem is they typically don't get enough opportunities to race over the course of a season, so we have to work on these same basic ideas in a practice situation so that they get more opportunities to learn. And the perfect place to do so is with our pace work. So the strategy that's often used is having swimmers repeat repetitions at perfect race pace and just do the same thing over and over again, hitting the exact pace they want to do in a race in the hopes that they'll train that pacing into their system so that they can just do it when it comes to race day. So for instance, they may do 850s at 200 pace, all at the same exact pace, all done exactly the same way. Now, while this can be useful for practicing the skill of swimming fast, it's not necessarily how they're going to pace a race. They don't swim at exactly the same speed, and they don't swim at exactly the same effort level all the way through. That's not how races work. And so while this type of pace work does have validity in terms of helping swimmers get used to swimming at certain speeds and learning those skills, we need to create actual racing situations in training. And while we could literally just do races in practice, have them go up on the blocks and go 100 freestyle, do 3 of them every 20 minutes, that's psychologically and physiologically overwhelming for most swimmers, and you really can't get a lot of practice. They only get a few repetitions before they're toast. So the solution is to use race pace type sets, but set them up in ways that better simulate racing and allow them to explore different pacing strategies. So to help swimmers learn the best way to pace their races, we expose them to different racing situations. That way, they can learn to be successful with different strategies and ultimately figure out what's going to work best for them and produce the best result in the fastest time. So we're going to go over 3 different strategies that I like to use in race pace sets to help swimmers learn these skills. The first strategy is to have swimmers start off swimming really fast and then move into race pace work. This helps provide swimmers with the opportunities to experience what it's like to go out really fast and then try to hang on. So for instance, they could go a 50 fast and then 350s at 200 pace. It's a very simple example of what we're trying to accomplish. It's going to be a challenge at first, and they're going to be very overwhelmed by the fatigue created by that first 50, but they will get better at it and they will improve. And they're going to learn how fast they can go out and still hang on and still execute the rest of the way. Not only will they get better at managing the fatigue that comes, they'll be better at figuring out the optimal pace and the optimal effort level to take it out with to give them the best chance to finish well. With a lot of practice, they'll have a better feel for how to manage and navigate taking it out really fast and then still being successful the rest of the way. And you can have them perform multiple repetitions of this so that they get a lot of practice figuring out what to do. And it's not necessarily that they're going to use this specific strategy in a race, but they have the ability to do so and to do so reasonably well if needed. At the other extreme, you can perform racing sets that involve a lot of descending and negative splitting, where swimmers focus on finishing really strong and being really aggressive on the back half of their races. They have to get good at turning up the speed and finishing really, really well. And so when writing sets, the goal is to set them up to finish really, really strong. So using our 450s example again, we could go 450s at pace +2, +1, 0, -1, so that they're really building through it and they're getting faster and faster, still in a race relevant context. They're practicing finishing really strong and picking up the speed to finish. Another similar strategy is to have them alternate pace work with aerobic work that's more controlled. So maybe 10 50s alternating a 50 pace and a 50 aerobic freestyle on a relatively tight interval. In this way, they recover aerobically by swimming pretty smooth on that 50 freestyle instead of just sitting on the wall. That type of set creates much more of a finishing strong feel. And so obviously this is a very different type of pace work as compared to our first example, our first strategy, and that's going to help swimmers learn to work at the different extremes. This particular strategy is really useful for helping swimmers learn how to be conservative, turn it up, and finish really, really strong. And again, by working at both extremes, it's much more likely that they're going to figure out the middle strategy, the middle approach that's going to work best for them. The third strategy I like to use, I call pre-fatiguing. And so what you do is you get them tired in some way and then have them perform race pace work. So you can specifically target certain areas of the body, such as the arms or the legs. So for instance, you could have them do 350s descend 1 to 3 kick to fast and then go into some pace work, or you could do the same thing pulling instead of kicking. This really helps swimmers navigate the second half of their races when part of their body is really fatigued. It happens in races, and so it can be really helpful to practice in training. That way it better prepares them to learn how to manage the second half of their races when they're already tired and they still have to execute, they still have to perform. There are tons of options here and you're only limited by your creativity. Just decide what area you want to make tired, create some fatigue, and then have them race. It helps provide them with a different perspective on pacing and learning how to execute and learning how to finish. So when putting these ideas into practice, if you're already doing pace work, you can introduce these ideas in different ways. Just make sure that you start slow and you set them up to be successful. The best way to do that is introduce these strategies in ways that are manageable rather than providing challenges that they just can't handle. Let them be successful and then ramp up the challenge. So to help swimmers learn to race and pace successfully, expose them to different conditions in different situations that they may find themselves in races and different race strategies that they may want to execute. And by working at the extremes, they're more likely to find a middle path that's going to work best for their abilities. Some swimmers do need to take it out a little bit faster. Some swimmers do need to be a little bit more conservative, and it can help them figure out what their options are and what they find most success with. By providing pacing challenges this way, it's a lot more engaging, it's a lot less repetitive, and they're going to learn more. And of course, they're also going to develop the fitness necessary to be successful in these different racing contexts. I hope that was helpful, and as always, keep it simple.